this little mix breakdown of Hand of God by Cameron Fitzgerald. Hopefully you've had a chance to check out the song, or at least a little clip that I put at the start of this video. But if not, let's just kind of start by giving you just like a brief overview of the song. I'm going to jump through these different sections real quick just so you can kind of have an idea of what we're dealing with in the song. So honestly, the song starts out pretty thin and ambient.
Holy Spirit, hand of God, come and make this heart your home.
So very thin. And then, as we start building in, by verse 2, we've got a little bit more going on here.
For me to trust with all my
And we got some kicks coming in, some synths. By the second chorus, it's a little bit bigger.
move with fire and wind.
A lot of orchestral percussion.
Be still again and free my broken heart.
And then by the time we get to the final chorus, it's just real big.
I know you can move with fire and wind. Till ocean waves be still.
So that's kind of just a very, very quick overview of what we got going on. So let's go ahead and talk about some of my first impressions when I first got this song to mix, because I feel like that's helpful to kind of understand the mindset before we just start jumping in different plugins and stuff. So some of my initial thoughts is, this song's a kind of an epic power ballad, so we need to make sure that the drums, the vocals, the effects all need to be pretty epic. We're going to use a little bit more long reverb on the vocals than I probably normally would, because like I said, it's a pretty ambient, cinematic, kind of epic power ballad thing. And then going along with that, the drums are going to be big. So that's kind of from the biggest overview, the sonic palette I think I want to go for. But drilling into that a little bit more, I know by the end, I want the drums to be really, driving the song, because, it's kind of this big thing. Within that, I like to think about each song, what's going to own the low end? Is it either going to be the kick or is it going to be the bass, whether that's a bass guitar or a bass synth or something? And I feel like on this song, because it is kind of power ballad and the drums are really punchy and driving, I want the kick to be driving it. And then the bass should be more of a driven bass rather than like a fat bass. So if we're thinking about what's in the bottom, main octave, it's going to be the kick drum. And then also beyond that, in order to kind of get the sound that I'm wanting, I know I want the drums and the bass to feel like super glued by the time we get to the end of the song. So what I ended up doing is making a rhythm bus, and we'll talk about what that means. But the idea is that, I want anything that's kind of creating the foundation of the song, the drums and the bass, to be really glued together, and honestly even a little bit of pumping on the compressor for all of that can actually kind of rock and add to some of the excitement. Let's talk about some of the problems and challenges here. So we have, first of all, there's a lot of dynamics in this song. It starts off super, super thin, but then ends up getting huge. So in situations like that, I try to think about what's something I can kind of create as the weight for the entire song. And I know the crescendo before it gets to the big rock and drum section. I know the piano and the vocal are probably the main things they're going to be wanting to have the most space and weight. And if we think about the piano is, I know I just used the word foundation to talk about drums and bass and stuff, but I think the piano is kind of the musical foundation for the first half of the song, and then the vocals on top of that. I kind of think about it in 3D space. If the piano in this case is the floor, and then the vocals are what you have on the walls. I don't know if that makes any sense whatsoever, but they kind of sit physically on top of it in kind of my weird way my brain thinks about sound. We have a fair amount of tracks here. I've got things kind of collapsed into folders right now, but still, there's a lot to sort through. There's going to be a lot of picking and choosing which part is going to be featured in which section. The producer Jared came up with a lot of really cool sounds, but he also just kind of left it up to me on what you would feature. And I think it's actually really helpful to think about, as much as we want every single part loud, we kind of also have to think about it. How do all the parts fit in a mix instead of just like, oh, I like this one line and like I really want that loud, but it also kind of clashes against this other thing. So, we're going to have to be a little bit more like picky about what we choose for each section. And it's okay if like this one part is more prominent in one section, but takes a backseat to another part in another section. So we'll hopefully talk about that a little bit. I might actually like change this instead of overlapping parts in the upper mids. I might just say there's a lot going on in the upper mids. We got strings, we got guitars, we got synths, and then we have vocals as well. So again, we're going to pick and choose, but we are going to do some tricks, I think, for, how are we going to get them all to work together, not clash? So we are going to, do some side chaining. We're going to actually do some side chaining, but with soothe. And I'll show you how I do that. And then on top of just like, EQing parts. So I know like, where everything is going to be. Also knowing that like, I'm going to keep the piano probably warmer. The tone was already pretty warm coming just off the production, but I don't want like, a lot of times like in like more of like a rock piano, I'll have it like very upper mid focus. And that's kind of like, driving like that. But, in this case, I think I wanted the piano a little bit like warm, lower mids. And that also partially because I wanted the vocals to shine through while having the piano have the weight for the start of the song, but also that leaves space for some of the strings and the other synths as we go throughout the rest of the song. Another challenge was that vocally, I only got one lead vocal and two background vocals. There was one that the main singer did as a harmony track, and then you had a female vocal doing also some harmonies and stuff. And that's usually a little bit less than I would like for a big epic ending to a song. So another thing I know I'm going to end up doing even before I jump in is I know I'm going to have to probably do like some pitch shifting and some doubling and flying. And that just means cutting it from one section and putting it in another section for what's needed for the final chorus. But I think for this, like, I wanted it to not just feel like there was this one like kind of mid-range vocal and that's it. But you'll see what I mean once we get into that. So let's go ahead and just kind of jump in here. And we'll work backwards, actually. So I have a mix bus, and, I've got some stuff on that. This is my final limiter that I just use for, like, loudness referencing, but other than that, it's not really a part of the sound. And then underneath that, I have a band bus, and I have a vocal bus that you can see here. So all the instruments go to the band bus, all the vocals go into the vocal bus. But within the band bus, I have it broken up into two different sections. I have the rhythm bus and I have the harmonic bus. And the idea is the rhythm bus is just going to be all like it's going to be the drums and the bass and the percussion and the transitions and stuff. That's going to be forming the, like the groove and the weight and all of that. And then the harmonic bus is almost like what the role of the vocal, it's like a lot of the stuff that's in like the main range of the vocal, but is instruments. Because going back to like, what I said was one of the things that I know is going to be potentially an area that could quickly become an issue is, I've got a lot going on in the upper mid range. And instead of just pushing the lead vocal louder, I want to be able to set it up so I can have all that same stuff in the same frequency. I know I'm probably going to have to end up doing a little bit of like side chaining to the vocal. I kind of want to glue all of that together as well, because if there's a lot of stuff that comes in, I kind of want to keep all of that controlled so that it doesn't poke out too much without it also affecting either the rest of the band bus or even, on the mix bus or anything. It's not really something I do for every song, but for this song, that ended up working. Why don't we go ahead and just bypass everything on the mix bus, and I'll play the final chorus so you can see how stuff's hitting, and then we'll just add stuff in one by one here. So let's play this and loop this. Let's open up the first thing. Actually, before I play this, I'll give a little background to this. I think what happened here is I put all the tracks in. I kind of got like a very rough balance, even before really going too crazy on the individual instruments. And I want to say like at one point, I probably just wanted like a little bit of extra like top end. So I probably did something like that. But then I did my first pass of the mix of the song, listened to it in the car, and I'm like, it's a little bit like dull overall. And so I probably just added a little bit of extra here as well. I don't know. It just kind of depends on what my mood is, how much of the mix bus EQ I try to do like right off the bat, but this is what ended up happening. A common theme is like, you don't necessarily copy this, but this was kind of, I'll explain what my thought process is and why I got to that point. And like I said, it was when I listened to this in the first mix in the car, I was like, it's just too dark. Anyway, okay, I'll stop talking and I'll just play this and we'll bypass this. So you can hear it's kind of putting it more like, so it needs to be bright enough. I don't know if that's exactly the curve. If you probably talk to the mastering guy, he'd probably have a better opinion on what it was, but I felt like this at least got me closer. So I'm just kind of trying to reference both stuff on other releases, but then in the car I was like, okay, I just need a little bit brighter. Moving on, my mix bus compressor is the iron here. And without getting too ahead of myself, if I'm thinking about, I have a little bit of compression on the band bus, I have a little bit of compression on the rhythm bus, I have a little bit of compression on the vocal bus, and I think in each one of those cases, I'm trying to accomplish a different thing. And I think on the mix bus, for this mix, I'm wanting it something a little bit smoother because I'm trying to like have something that's like really pretty, that's going to be working with the vocal and the track. I like to think about like, in this case, I was trying to have the vocal be the thing that was really pushing this and gluing the rest of the track and kind of creating I always think about it like a dance. And, I wanted a very nice, pretty push and pull with the vocal. And so I'll bypass this off and on and you'll hear what it's doing. Threshold set pretty high. I think that's just where the gain staging ended up happening. I don't know. Slightly slower attack, medium release. Oftentimes I usually have it closer to that, but for this song, I'm just thinking about the tempo and what feels right in the moment. Sidechain high pass filter. It's up like 130-ish. I just did this because, for this, I'm not wanting to have the drums really trigger it as much as I'm trying to like have it like glue with the vocal. And so I think this kind of gets some of the weight of the drums to not trigger it as much. And then the stereo width knob. This is just something that, I don't know. Sometimes it just kind of feels nice. So. So honestly, it's not doing too much. It's just kind of like barely moving along with the vocal. All right, moving on. Next is the Oxford Inflator, and this is just something that adds a little bit of, well, I am adding a little bit of level just because of how hard I wanted to actually hit the saturation stage in here. But again, it's just a little bit to kind of glue things together, add a little bit of loudness or ability to have some loudness. So what I'll do is I'll actually use this toggle so you can hear more of a gain matched thing because, like I said, I am adding input gain here. So you can see it's getting a little bit louder. It's getting a little bit more saturated. Just kind of nice little effect without going super, super overboard. And then the final thing here, I have ozone. I can't remember when I added this little high shelf. Maybe it was as I was like trying to get another round of trying to get it bright enough. But then the other thing is just, a little bit of extra level here just to prevent it hitting the ceiling. But also, I don't know, I just like when I hit the sound of hitting the limiter a little bit. It was cool. So I'll just play that back and forth for you. Move with fire and wind till
ocean waves be still again and free my broken heart from what's within. Oh, make mountains with the
So that's pretty much it on the mix bus. Honestly, pretty minimalist because, like I said, I think I'm probably doing a little bit more with these individual band bus and vocal buses. So let's talk about each of those for now. So the band bus, let's go ahead and let's bypass that. But let's open up this because I'm not doing anything except for just actually turning it down a little bit because I wanted to hit this compressor at a certain level. And I just usually, at some point, like to make sure that, you know, going into my main buses that I'm actually sort of in the right ballpark. And I like how the metering is on this thing. So I usually like things, you know, kind of sitting in the upper range of this. Honestly, this is a little bit quieter than I normally push it, but whatever. A lot of plugins that have kind of like analog modeling tend to like do pretty well like in that range. So I think that's kind of why I was doing that. I probably at one point was playing around with having a, you know, the VCC mix bus in here, but I probably got rid of it for whatever reason. But anyway, that's still there because I didn't want to mess up my gain staging. So let's talk about the band bus. This is the Townhouse. I don't know why I chose this one. It's not necessarily my favorite. It's just their take on an SSL. I think I just picked it, and at a certain point, I just kind of rolled with it. So let's talk about the settings here. So I have the threshold pretty much at 0, because this is kind of where it's designed to be hit. Again, you know, that's why I think, probably doing some of this. 4-to-1 ratio, a little bit longer attack because, well, we'll get there, but I have a little bit of a faster, like, grabbier attack for the rhythm bus. But remember, okay, so this is all the drums and the bass, and then also all the harmonic stuff like the guitars and synths and everything. So it doesn't necessarily need to be as fast. It could be, I mean, I'll show you like a couple alternative settings, and maybe if I was remixing it today, I might do a little faster attack, but that. And then auto release, because it has kind of a fancy program dependent, almost 2-stage thing going on. Verse. Well, once we get there, I'll talk about why on the rhythm bus I have a faster manual attack like that. But here, I'll bypass this, and you can hear what that's doing, how that's kind of gluing the entire band together. So you can see barely kind of just like giving a little bit of like a dance. You can hear everything's kind of not glued together. See, and this just kind of, you know, tightens it up, puts everything together. I like to, it makes it feel like more of one instrument, which is kind of cool like that. Okay, let's talk about harmonic bus and rhythm bus. So first of all, I've muted the harmonic bus. You can hear everything that's going on in the rhythm bus. Pretty much just drums, bass, percussion. I kind of want this, you know, feeling pretty tight. So I'm not doing a ton of compression, but it sounds way less punchy when I get rid of it for the amount of compression I'm doing here. Drums, bass feel a little disconnected when it's bypassed. And then, like, you know, when they're glued together, it feels kind of like, yeah, you know, they kind of dig in. They got a little meat going on there. 2-to-1 ratio here because it actually has like a little bit of like a bigger knee. I probably could have done 4-to-1, but I don't know. At a certain point, I just pick something and roll with it. Attack is on the faster side because I wanted it to be a little grabbier, just to kind of accent some of the tightness. And then fast 100 millisecond release. On the hardware, it's fast anyway. Like this model lets you go not standard, but just because I didn't want necessarily the longer release of like an auto attack. I just wanted it nice and snappy like that. See, if I do the auto release, it still works, but I don't know. I just feel like it's a little different. Okay, let's talk about the harmonic bus. So you're gonna hear this is like a lot of the decoration. It's not the foundation. It's what's all in the like the mid range, the upper mids, competing with the vocals. I'm not really sure when I added that. I think it was just trying to find the right balance of everything, get louder and quieter, or brighter and not. I really like this compressor on a lot of things. In fact, a lot of times I'm even using it on a mix bus, but I just wanted something that was kind of, you know, pretty and gonna like glue everything together in like just like a different way than the iron. I don't even know how to describe it. It's just kind of, I put it on and it's like, oh yeah, no, that was the sound I looked for. It's just trying to like squeeze everything together in like a way that makes it feel like one instrument. Say there's like, you know, a string part that I've pushed up, it like, you know, kind of pushes everything else down behind it a little bit. And I'll toggle this so you can hear what that's doing. Back in. Especially like listen really on those big like diamond rakes on the acoustic there. Or the electric. The swing. Here. Swing. You know. Just kind of like puts it all together like a super, super pretty way. And then after that, this is the trick I was kind of talking about earlier. I don't normally like to soothe things, but in this case, what I did is all of these harmonic instruments or whatever. I need to come up with a better name for that, but it's just, you know, what I've been rolling with. The sidechain input of this soothe is being sent out from the lead vocal channel. And that's just to kind of carve out a little bit of space, like very subtly. I'm not trying to do too much. It's just kind of, it's almost like how like some people use track spacer, but this is what I have and it worked. So we went with it. Soft because I want it pretty subtle. Sharpness, in general, even went and soothe. I don't like the super sharp because I think that like notching out stuff is actually not what you want most of the times. But I really wanted to think about, okay, like, you know, the vocal's sitting in this like register and we're actually trying to carve out this octave more for the vocal rather than like, you know, notching out any specific thing. It's just more transparent, it's a little more musical, and it's more just kind of, I think, fitting the goal. Mid-side mode, and honestly, it's only doing mid. I probably could have had a little bit of the sides get pushed down too, but it's just, it is what it is. So let me actually put the vocal back in and you can see what it's doing. I think I boosted in this section for some reason. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's just in the car or something. My instinct would have been to do something like this. So maybe I did this because I felt like it was getting a little cloudy, muddy. But anyway. So you can hear it's just making a little bit of space here. You know, it's kind of subtle, but I feel like it just kind of adds a little bit. And you can see it's only like dipping things like maybe a dB at a time. But it helps a little bit, just helps to make a little bit of space without necessarily needing the vocal to be super, super out in front. Maybe that's just like, maybe that's just what I like, is I don't like the vocal like super, super out front, but I'm always trying to think about like, how can I have the vocal be in the track, but still like feel loud enough, but still, but not like be so loud that it's taking away from the impact of the track. But again, I think some of that's just personal preference there. Okay. Let's talk about what's going on. Well, now let's forget the vocals for now, and let's just talk about all the different instruments. Just start with the drums here. So as we go throughout the song, there's not a lot going on drums-wise for the first little bit here. It's not until verse 2 that we have, this kind of mellow kick coming in. And honestly, I don't even think I'm doing anything here. This is just on here because I wanted it to have a little more like harmonics or something. Let's see what else we got going on here. Okay, we have some toms going on in this first verse. And honestly, like if you solo that, you're like, whoa, that's like super, super muddy. But again, like in context, I wanted it to be more just about like the atmosphere here. And it was more about just like kind of the, you know, kind of cinematic thing going on. Yeah, and I think I was going to start doing something, but I got rid of it. A little bit of reverb. So that's what's going on here. Let's look at some of the percussion because it's kind of the same vein. Drum bus though. You know, just a little bit of a top shelf. Again, it was probably just trying to figure out what needed to be brighter, and then just like a tiny bit of clipping off the top, but that's really only hitting once we get to the end of the song. The percussion bus, you know, I'm just kind of my fake little custom channel strip here, just for a little bit of harmonics and all that. Percussion, I think, you know, this is because we have some booms and stuff, and I wanted to make sure that, you know, if I had like a timpani swell in along with a boom and like everything else, that it kind of just kept that a little bit under control. You can see, I have the manual threshold going on there. Let's see if I can find a spot where that may be hitting. That's not even hitting there. It's probably maybe even here. Guess not. Am I even hitting it ever? No, I guess not. Yeah, I'm getting close, and maybe at one point I was, but it's just what it is now. Looks like maybe I am clipping here a little bit. Yeah, I think I just wanted some of those like transients when we had like a lot of different like impacts and stuff going on at the same time. Anyway, let's go back to the drums though. Let's see. We have, you know, this kick comes in. We have some shaker go. Oh, we have an acoustic kick that Jared sent me. Let's actually turn up all these waveforms here just so we can see it a little bit better. I think he wanted it just to start feeling slightly more acoustic at chorus 2. It's in there pretty subtly. It's just for like the air of it. Yeah, super, super subtle. You probably wouldn't even realize it was there. I mean, like, I forgot it was there, so there we are. You know, halfway through this chorus, we have a big snare coming in. You can hear that's really blown up. In fact, I have double lock on it. Let's mute this verb for now. I'll show you just kind of what the raw sound was. So he already had it like pretty blown up here. Let's listen to that context. But, you know, if you listen to that, it's just like pretty quick, and I wanted it like, you know, to feel a little bit more like epic. So first thing I did, double lock, the mix, you know, kind of halfway. Other than that, it's the default settings. Sounds cool. But then, let's see. I think I just want a little bit, I don't know, probably just a little bit of vibe. Oh, it looks like, no, I'm adding some weight. That's cool. Yeah, I just wanted a little bit like extra like oomph on the snare. A little more like Def Leppard, a little more power ballad. And then the final thing is the verb. And this is, yeah, I really like this, was it DP ballad snare or something? So just a big old plate. Kind of just gives it like a vibe. And then I have this FG Moo on here. And I'm actually not using this as a compressor. This compressor has like a upper mid bump and adds some harmonics in a really cool way that I felt like helps the presence of this verb stick out in the way I really wanted. So I'll bypass this. Or that's enabled. And then bypassed. You know, subtle, but I feel like it just kind of helps it poke out a little bit more. Let's see what else we got going on here. You know, we have some, you know, toms. They're kind of subtle, but it's almost like just a transition. I don't say am I even doing anything to that? Nope, just giving it a little bit extra vibe. And you know, obviously this is even like way behind some of the the timpanis and taikos and stuff. Do we? Yeah, we have it here. Yeah, you know, pretty subtle. Honestly, I probably could have muted it, but yeah, it all gets together in the end. Let's see what else we got going on for drums. At a certain point, yeah, we have the more of like the kit kick coming in here. So this is some sort of sample. I forgot where he got it from, but you can see what I'm doing is I'm just adding a little bit of upper mid range, like 3K-ish, just for a little bit extra knock. I'm gating it, and I'm barely hitting the compressor. And honestly, I think the gate is doing more, especially in this big chorus here, than the compressor is. Gates are really cool on drums because what they do is they actually shape the envelope a little bit. And actually, in this it's not technically a gate; it's probably an expander mode, but you know, whatever. Just kind of gives a little bit extra like click and punch in a way that, yeah, it's just really cool. I like it. Like, because the closing and opening of the gate like kind of adds like an extra attack, which is cool. Yeah, and then a little bit extra like knock. Upper mid as well. Just because I felt like, you know, right out of the gate, it was, it was pretty subby. And so let's just add a little bit extra presence in a sec. And again. And yeah, this compressor is adding a little bit of gain, but whatever. It happens. And I'm automating that so that, you know, in this build up here, it's not quite as big. And then by the time it gets to the final chorus and it opens up, it's like, okay, yeah, now it's really hitting. So let's play that. And yeah, for this big fill, you know, I'm pushing it up a little bit. Okay. And by the time we get to the final chorus, we not only have this big snare that we've trashed out earlier. And I think that was just a one shot that you did. We also add in this other snare. So that's pretty cool. And it looks like I am doing a little bit of shaping already. Let's mute the snare verb again. So you can see it's like, you know, I mean, it already sounds kind of like nice and fat. And honestly, I probably could have had it without this, but again, I'm a sucker for big in-your-face drums, so. And so I have this, so actually whenever it hits, it actually boosts the fundamental. It's almost like a transient shaper just for that. I just felt like, you know, some of this like upper 5K kind of crusty noise, like I just wanted a smidge less, and then also a little bit extra like crack on the snare. Here you can see I'm kind of doing the fake transient designer thing. And then a little bit of SSL. I think I'm just adding a little bit of top shelf. And then barely a little bit of this here as well. And again, that's being sent to the snare verb. And then when you layer it in with this kind of trashed out beauty snare. Is it too big? Is it too much snare? Maybe, but I like it. So it's cool. And I'm mixing the song. So ha 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 ha. Yeah, I'm just a sucker for big drums. Crashes and stuff. You can see I'm doing some automating because I wanted the big downbeats to really hit loud crashes. And then some of the more like incidental crashes, which are supposed to be just more of kind of like a, you know, just kind of tapping on the crash a little bit for a little bit extra shh, whatever. Automated down because, yeah, I mean, this is all programmed drums, so it's kind of cool like that. Just felt like I need a little bit of extra automation there. Yeah, just throwing those downbeats. And on top of that, we have a hat. Just kind of driving. But there's also a ride going. Like I said, Jared doesn't care. He's just kind of doing it. It's cool. I mean, they both kind of like, I mean, the ride's a little laid back. The hat's a little more driving. I think I just ended up, you know, finding something and was trying not to stress about it too much. I mean, as you can hear, I kind of favored a little bit more the hat, just because I wanted a little bit drivey. But I also really like the ride had like a nice like length to the hat, so maybe that's kind of where I ended up. Is like, oh, I like the drive of the hat, but like the ride adds the fake ride adds a little bit of length and stuff. And yeah, not really doing anything on these. Just kind of, I think I threw it on for the vibes. You know, building up this little tom snare thing. Yeah, just for one little part there. Yeah. I think I just compressing a little bit. But I think I was, you know, maybe hitting it just a little bit harder just because, you know, I wanted some of the length out of the snare because it was kind of, you know, that like marching transatlanticism thing going on there. Have some tom fills. And let's see. Yeah, I think I boosted this just, you know, to get a little bit extra hair on that. Just, yeah, because I think I you know, I just wanted a little bit of like extra like oomph in the, you know, a little bit of grit. And then adding just a little bit extra shelf, a little bit of bottom just for extra weight. Yeah. So that's the drums, I guess. The percussion stuff and some of the effects as well. You know, we have a little boom just for some of the downbeats. Another layer of that. Some more cinematic one. We have this clap impact, which is basically like a crash. You know, Jared, the producer's, is kind of a EDM pop guy, so, you know. Just kind of help reinforcing some of that crash on the downbeat there. We have this little loop that kind of goes throughout a couple different parts of the songs. You know. No, it's pretty subtle. It probably didn't even need to be in this, like, you know, final chorus or anything, but it is. But you know, here in this chorus 2, I think is where it's probably doing more. And again, it's pretty subtle, but it's just kind of, it's a little bit subtle ear candy. And you know, if I was remixing this today, I might have that a little bit louder just for some interest. Shaker, a little bit extra verb just so it's in a space, and then just SSL for the vibes. Just because, you know, I didn't want the shaker feeling too dry and in your face and drivey. I just wanted it kind of, you know, a part of the cinematic wash. Tambo. I think if I was remixing the song today, I'd have the tambo going a little bit harder just for some of that like 16th subdivision, but you know, we mute it falls apart. Well, it doesn't fall apart, but you know, if it gets muted, it's definitely like less cool. Just kind of is missing that 16th subdivision. And not doing anything with that, except for just vibes. Okay, and the bridge. We have two kind of marchy things going on here. We have you know, this kind of a stick that's more of like a drum line kind of a thing. And it's not really a drum line, but you know what I mean. Then we have a brush. So for those on the like the drum linear thing, I have the saturation cranked. Just because I didn't want like the pings of the snare poking out too much. And it looks like I boosted that a little bit, so let's just... Just a little bit of extra vibe and hair on that. And then, yeah, nothing going on there except for just the normal harmonics from the SSL channel strip. This blip. Just for a little extra verb. But it's also mixed in with this stick. Just, you know, just some verb. Tambo, verb. Yeah, I think I was just trying to blow that up a little bit more because I didn't want, like, the ping of it to stick out as much. Yeah, because it was, you know, since it's mostly about the reverb rather than the actual ping of it. You know, I just felt like that was a little bit... a little unrestrained, a little boring. Add some sauce. So that's that. We have some cymbal swells. Not doing anything on the channel strip. Just adding a little bit extra verb for a little bit extra length. You know, that is for the length. That's all it is. And just a little bit of verb helps it feel a little less direct mic'd. Tychos. So I think I am probably blowing this up a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, a little bit there. Let's see what I had in the next stage. Did I push any more? Just a little bit more. And then just a little more. Probably could have gone away with just, you know, one or two of these, but still. Okay, so the Tycho impacts. Let's see what's going on there. So yeah, just a little boring, just kind of on its own. Just trying to add a little harmonics. I think I got rid of some of the sub because I really wanted it to be about the impact on the upper mids and hearing the verb and the hall or the virtual hall or whatever there. So I got rid of that. And then I think nothing here. Yep. It's just about finding the right balance there. Timpani rolls. Yeah, nothing going on in the channel strip. I just want a little more weight, I guess. Don't know if it's doing too much, but, you know, here we are. Yeah, I think I just didn't want that, like, final hit to jump out too much, so instead of compressing it, I just, you know, kind of saturate it. But I did compress it, too, so... You know, just kind of subtle. I don't know, I just kind of was cooking until it felt right. Yeah, so just put it all together, kind of, you know, holds it together when it kind of finally hits. Okay, let's talk about one of these sweeps. I think it's just some noise. Yeah, nothing going on in the channel strip. Probably same thing with this whoosh. No, it's just a quick little whoosh. Yeah, probably could have been louder. But, you know, just something to kind of add a little extra something. Yeah, just, yeah, it adds a little bit of something. Okay, I don't know what these war drums are. This is some more Tychos. A little bit of compression. EQ's just left over. I think this is, I knew this was going to have a little more extra weight to it. So I put it on the Brit end setting, which it adds a really cool boost that I like on the bottom end. And then, a little bit extra saturation and stuff from the tape machine. Automating this up. It's a little kind of taking a back seat. And it kind of builds in. And all that. So that's kind of overview of all that. If you have any questions about what's going on here, I'll try to answer it in the comments. But yeah, other than that, it's just kind of find the right balance that I liked. Getting the big main drums is the biggest thing. So for the bass, nothing on the bus. It's just in a folder because if I wanted to do some sort of bus processing, maybe I was like, thinking about it. I had the option, but also because I knew he was going to probably want to perform this at some point. I routed everything so that I could easily print some stems here. So, like drums, percussion, bass, guitar. Anyway, but, within here we have a bass guitar. And this is doing some pretty bass. This is, I did split it. So, the first half is the clean bass guitar and the end is the dirty bass guitar. So let's just play the clean for now. Now let's see, I am rolling out some of the lows. I probably didn't need to do that. I'm getting rid of some of the highs. So cutting it at 8K. And then I'm pushing it because I want it more of like the wood. Or I want to say I played the bass on this for Jared, but anyway, pretty sure it was with thumb, and so trying to get a little bit extra thumb because, like I said, it's not necessarily. I'm letting the kick kind of be the low, and I didn't want it to feel too subby. I want it for just kind of the note. So doing a little compression, the LA2A. I mean, this was already compressed probably to begin with. We probably had, I can't remember what we did, but just want a little more compression because, it's, kind of fat and smooth. So I did the LA2A instead of, like an 1176 or a distressor or anything, but, a little extra note. And then filtering out some of the top and bottom and a little bit extra, like 900-ish. A little bit extra compression too. Just kind of help it sit. And I am automating this because, I didn't want it to feel too heavy, this first chorus. I just kind of almost wanted it to feel more like an extension of the piano here. So pretty subtle. And then, by this interlude, then, it kind of hits a little bit harder. For this kind of this down bridge here, same thing, kind of wanted it to be more of an extension of the piano. And then building here up to a point where it's boosted, where you can kind of hear some of the rhythm of it through the note. Okay. Before we jump to, well, no, let's just do that now. Let's look at then what I did at the end. So I muted it on this kind of this more chill bass track, and then did my own like a separate thing for the chorus for the big section. Because like I said, I'm really imagining this where it's the drums that are like really big and owning the low ends and punchy, and then the bass is a little bit more just there for like a little bit of growl. So you can see right out of the gate, I'm throwing a lot on it. Almost kind of like a buzzsaw, And so in the track, what I'm listening for is I'm hearing from like a little bit of the gnarl that kind of like pokes through, and in fact, let's actually just mute the harmon. Yeah. See, just by itself, it's kind of boring. switch to a pick here, but, you know. Boosting the top, literally floored. There's a little bit of compression there, don't let the 0 fool you. And then rip setting, which is like, you know, the driviest of them all. And then honestly, bass chorus is super underrated, so. So that was cool, but then, you know, just listening to some context, got closer, but I really wanted to push it more, so. Decap. Probably could have driven it more too, but. And then EQ. I think there was just like, you know, one note about where the pick hit that I just didn't love. A little extra top, and then, I don't know, that's not really needed up there, so I just kind of did a little bit of filtering out. And then tape machine adds a little saturation, adds a little more drive. Let's see. I did have a slight bass de-alignment, but I still think technically it's probably boosting the bass even with that a little bit, but, you know. Yeah, just feeling big. Love it. A little bit of that. And then I think beyond that, I've added this gate, not just on the SSL, but, you know, for whatever reason. Can't remember what my reasoning was, but at one point in time, there was some noise that I was trying to track down. It's not needed. It's not for sonic reasons at all, except for just me trying to get rid of noise. And then we did have a sub bass here. And this is just, you know, for the extra, if I wanted a little bit extra control on that there. You know, honestly, it's pretty subtle. But like I said, you know, I really wanted it to be about the punch of the drums. But this is just to make sure that the low octave was still there, you know, in some capacity there. Okay, this Reese. Let's play this. You know, this is just to add a little bit extra growl without it necessarily feeling like in your face. Just kind of a subtle growl. And then I think I used this just so, like, you know, I can mono it. But probably didn't need to do that. A little extra. Get rid of this. A little boring. Put it back in. It's kind of interesting. Chorus 2, this is kind of the main, it's like a sub bass-ish, but, you know, it kind of adds a little bit extra lift because, you know, we have the electric bass here for the verse, but it's also in the chorus, and this just kind of adds a little bit extra lift. So instead of like a sub-synth on the chorus, without it necessarily feeling too heavy, this Reese kind of fills that same role. It looks like I do have a little bit of EQ, clip EQ. Yeah, I think I was just filtering out some of the low end. Yeah, you know, otherwise it'd be real subby. So, yeah. Okay, moving on to the acoustics. So we got a couple of different acoustics in here. And this is kind of coming back to that conversation about different parts and stuff that's, you know, there. You know, chorus 2, I know we really wanted things to kind of feel like it was pushing forward a little bit. So one of the ideas we played around with was like, you know, something like that to kind of just, you know, start driving a little bit. I think we just felt like it was taking away from the cinematic kind of feel to it. And we really wanted it to feel like, you know, grand and everything at this point. So that was kind of taken away from it. But we do have these big diamonds. Let's kind of go through this chain here. I don't know why I have this gate on here. Maybe there was some noise or something. But other than that, a little bit of tape just for some vibe. For some reason, I decided to put on the Neve setting on here just for a little extra weight. Maybe if I was redoing it today, I'd do the API. Because because it was already kind of feeling like a little bit muddy, but oh well, you know, it is what it is. Okay, but let's talk about these individual tracks here. So we can probably just go ahead and hide that and make that inactive. Let's talk about this Diamonds acoustic. You know, this is just for like the sunshiny kind of chorused something or other. It's just raw, standard double track. A little bit of tape. 15, 456, just for extra, so it's like felt real vibey. And then for this type of thing, especially, you know, for this type of song, LA2A, you know, it's real pretty. Opto kind of gives acoustics a nice like glass. Then SSL, just a little bit of compression. And then the verb kind of gives it an extra like kind of makes it feel pretty. There's some modulation on this, so it kind of gives it like a chorus effect. Yeah. And then on top of that, we have a mono acoustic that's more of like the driven thing rather than, if we think about like, you know, these diamonds, you know, that's for the nice wide sunshine, whatever. But then, you know, down the middle is the shaker. Let's play that. We're doing a little bit of a tape machine. You can hear it's kind of crunching up a little bit. We might have had a little bit of compression out of the tracking session, but whatever. You know, getting rid of some of this boom. You know, in retrospect, I probably could have cut some of this, but whatever. Not a lot going on there. Just a little bit extra. Just get a little space. And I'm automating this, so it's, you know, when it comes in, I feel like the room kind of helps it not just feel like so drying in your face. It kind of helps give it like a little atmosphere. So I get rid of that. Just a little too, whatever. But this adds like a nice little, like you hear some of the reflections, and it's pretty nice like that. And then, you know, when it switches from the campfire thing to the straight eighths. Just boosting a little bit. An extra lift here for the final. Cool. So that was that. Okay, we have some electrics. They're mostly ambient. I think so much of this, you know, it's probably like a guitar rig preset or something. I don't know, I just felt like that was maybe jumping out at me. Probably didn't need to do it, but I did. Some more harmonics. And a little extra reverb just to add to the swirl. Because I didn't want the part to be too distinct here, you know? Or anywhere, really. And we have another pad guitar. I think this was a part of the original demo Cameron sent us. Which is cool. Just add a little more extra verb on that. Yeah, just to kind of give it a little bit of space. Here's another example of, you know, something we tried but didn't like. This dotted eighth sort of a thing. You know, again, I think, you know, same thing with like the muted acoustic here. You know, we didn't want it to distract from the big grand orchestral thing going on here. And if we had that in there, it might be a little too much. You know, It's not that bad, but, you know, it's easier just to be like, yeah, we don't need it. Some big diamond electric guitars. Huh. That was already pretty bright. I must have... That sounds like me playing. I want to say it was probably Archetype Nolly. I probably already had like a pretty bright setting, or maybe even just bounced it out with a little bit of something. Maybe it was, you know, something like that. But other than that, you know, just here for a little extra vibe. There's some swells that I think Cameron also sent us as a part of the demo. Yeah, okay, so there's that one riff that's kind of in verse 1. But I didn't want it to like distract him from the lead vocal. So I think what I did is I put the Zamando mod, which is just kind of like, it pans it back and forth, just kind of subtly, just for a little extra, I don't know, spaciness, vibe, warmth, whatever you want to call it. Insert your favorite word there. Then a little extra verb just for extra soup. Because if I had it just like straight up the middle, let me mute these vocals again. You know, I mean, it is wide, it's kind of spacey, but let's play it again. But I feel like it was just kind of added to the atmosphere to have it panned. I don't know, subtle, but I liked it. Okay, lead guitar part here on the bridge. This is matching the strings, actually, I think. Yeah. So I don't think anything going on there. A little bit of slide guitar. And then the main kind of guitar for the final chorus that I called U2. LL. I don't know what. Yeah. Probably didn't need to actually do that, but I did. Just a little extra vibe there. And I had that a little bit more forward just because, you know, like the main counterpoint up until this point has been the strings, but, you know, I wanted something that was kind of more in the same groove pocket as the drums, you know, something a little drivey. So we kind of had that push and pull between this driving guitar thing and the rest of the strings. So that was the idea there. Okay, this orchestra, I think he just sent, I can't remember why I have this just as one file. It's just all the strings put together. Let's get rid of a bunch of this. Still a little bit of tape, just because strings always sound cool with tape. Kind of helps take like some of the sound a little bit less like it's coming out of contact, you know. Just a little subtle lift. Then, guess a little top there, but a little bit of compression, but barely. And then, this is one of the few places you'll see me use multiband compression. I hate multiband compression generally. But for this, because I wanted to make sure that, like, you know, I was kind of treating the basses and the cellos and the violins all kind of, you know, keeping them separately compressed. I don't know. This is where I'm probably doing a little bit more. Like, I may not have needed it, but, you know, here we are. That's what happened. Don't know if it was the right call, but it's what happened. That's generally just my philosophy, I guess, is I spent the longest time trying to think like, I have to find like the perfect setting. There's one perfect mix. But I guess the older I get, it's like, no, it worked. Let's move on. Okay. The piano. So a little bit of LA2A just because, again, it's kind of pretty, adds a little glass. I'm rolling off some of this top end just because I felt like there was maybe too much like... I wanted to make sure that the piano didn't feel too like sizzly. And so just kind of getting rid of some of that. Not that there was that much up there anyway, but I just felt like I wanted to. And then SSL just for a little bit of vibe, tiny bit of compression. Not really doing anything. I believe this is the Woodchester piano. And then it looks like I have a clip effect going on for the big chorus just to kind of like add a little bit of punch because there's a lot going on. I wanted to make sure it wasn't too muddy. Yeah, you can hear like, top end gets a little sizzlier. Some of the lows go compared to... Okay, moving on. These synths. Let's see what's going on here. I did separate the synth leads from the synth pads. So what's going on? Synths, ARPs. There's this kind of ARP that moves in. So he is automating the filter. I'm automating the volume on top of the filter just because I felt like I wanted a little bit more contrast. Let's put this in context. So I have it start with, okay, it's here. Then I kind of bring it down so it's a little bit more back, and then it starts building in again. Generally for this type of like ear candy stuff, I generally like to have it be like, oh, cool, it's here. Pull it down, and then settle into the groove from there. I think that automation will make a little more sense with the vocal in.
For me to trust with all my soul.
It's building in. Not doing anything.
'Cause I know you can move with fire.
And I brought this down here because we have a bunch of stuff coming in on the chorus that I wanted to have that be more of the feature because that's the new stuff. I wanted to draw the ear more towards that rather than this one synth ARP.
Oh, you can move with
But it does build in again.
your fingerprint, and still you.
And then we have this kind of this ambient piano doing the same thing as the strings.
With a single press and break them with
Not doing anything here.
And still you got me gently to.
And that's all the synth leads that are going on. Let's talk about these pads. So we have this main kind of ambient pad. It's just kind of... Sounds like he's just kind of filtering it in and out. There's nothing on that. It's just going straight to the bus. We have these chords. It's kind of a tremolo thing. I think I just put a little bit of extra compression on this just to kind of smooth out some of the choppiness without necessarily getting rid of the tremolo. Cutting some of these upper mids just because,
To leave behind.
I didn't want it to be like too in your face. I wanted it more about the atmosphere of that kind of subdivision. I wanted it to kind of just like feel a little bit like bouncy without necessarily sounding bouncy, if that makes sense. And then for the big chorus, we have SY chords big. And I think, yeah, he just had this kind of, shimmery pad. Didn't do anything EQ wise. But I wanted, like in context, I wanted like some of that 16th subdivision.
Move with fire and wind till ocean waves be still again and free my broken heart.
And again, pretty subtle, but, just kind of a part of just building the overall bed of the track. And then we had this, what is this? I think it was just, it's kind of an EDM trick, I guess. I felt like we didn't need it. Kind of some, noise pad, but yeah, didn't need it in this context. So that's that. VX is what I call vocal effects. So this is not necessarily like reverse reverbs and stuff on the vocal. This is like vocal chops. This is like ambient stuff that's like a part of what I would consider more of like an instrument rather than like a part of the sauce of the vocal. So just a little riser, just barely compressing it. Sounds like he just sang something and then shifted it up and down. Kind of compressing, adding a little extra verb. There's probably already verb on this. But again, just kind of wanted a little bit spacier. Doing a little automation here. So this is like the main counterpoint going on in this first verse here.
To your side and lead me to.
And then we have this kind of ambient hook thing. Sounds really weird when you solo it, but you know, sounds kind of cool in context. So just adding a little extra verb, a little bit of channel strip sauce, inflating it just because I don't know. It just felt like a little too naked, I guess, on its own. And then filtering out some of the highs so it's not quite like, you know, in your face and sparkly. It's meant to kind of be, you know, ambient and washy and all that. And then for this little interlude, kind of a similar thing. But yeah, so that's all the instrument parts. Let's talk about the vocals. So just as you can see, this is where I go to town and probably spend most of my time on. I think just philosophically for me, it's like if I can get the drums and the vocals feeling good, like that's successful to me. For better or for worse. That's just me. So I have a lead vocal here. I have a lead vocal split for the final big chorus because I wanted it to be compressed a little differently. We have the female BGVs. We have Cameron's BGVs. We have a couple of, and these are all the different effects that I made. And we'll dissect each one of these, and then we have a whole bunch of different effects going into stuff. Like I said, I knew right out of the gate I was going to probably want a longer verb, and it's just a matter of like figuring it out. I did something that I don't normally do where I have like a really long reverb, and then I also have a really kind of medium reverb. Like medium reverb, I mean, 4 seconds is somewhat long, but then I also have, you know, something that's more like 6, 7, 8 seconds here. And I just kind of found like a balance between the two. Normally I just kind of pick one and go with it, but for this one, I don't know, maybe something worked about this. Something about the blending of these two tones, the fact that we have like a shorter, kind of added some density to the first part of the tail, and then before like tailing off a little bit thinner for longer. In addition to, you know, quarter note delay. This is my slap 166. It's the, well, I guess I didn't keep it at that, but I call it 166 because that's like the John Lennon setting. An eighth note that looks like it's side chained so that it's to the vocal, so that it ducks when the vocal hits. And then I have a doubler that only the big chorus is being sent to. So let's break down each one of these. Let's think about, well, let's mute all these effects for now. And we'll just kind of build up the vocal. Okay, so all the effects are there. Here's the raw vocal out of the tuning. You can see some Melodyne stuff. I Melodyned it in a different session, but I think there was just like one little timing thing that I wanted to fix. That's why you see the Melodyning here. But yeah, right out of the gate, a little bit of tape.
And in your endless mercy.
So yeah, you can hear a couple of different things. There's a little bit of compression already on this. I can't remember where in the process that was. If it was me as a part of the vocal tuning, it was probably Waves Blue 1176, but I could be wrong. You can hear there's a little bit of room from the studio they tracked it in if you listen.
That rose, and in your endless mercy, when I've lost my,
But we just, we're rolling with it. So
and in your endless
a little bit of
mercy,
EQ.
when I've lost my way,
Just felt like there's maybe a little build up there. Getting rid of some of the rumble. Just as a note, I don't normally gate vocals. Watch as, I probably end up doing, but whatever. As soon as I've said that, I usually, in like another session as I'm doing like the vocal cleanup, I'll probably do something like, this and just like go through on every single word just to make sure it's like super, super tight. So just, that's an important part of the vocal chain, in my opinion. If I get something to mix that's already been tuned, that is the first step I will always do, is I'll probably like, strip some silence and then, do some fades and all that. Okay, so after the EQ, okay, good. I didn't gate. I didn't put my foot in my mouth. LOL. This is just a very, very basic, I have it hardly compressing at all, but like, if we go to a bigger section here,
with a single breath and break them.
I think it's just, to barely level it before going into this 1176. This is the purple 1176. I don't know why I wanted to try it. It's not normally my go-to, but let's play it.
And in your endless mercy, when I've lost my way, I hear you tell.
Well, let me actually back up and talk about a little bit of the philosophy of because so much of the song is like chill, right? I'm not trying to make it sound too aggressive. Otherwise, if you hit an 1176 too hard, it's gonna sound like pretty spitty, and that's cool for the right thing. Probably like for this big chorus, that's the right thing. But here I'm really just trying to like shave off like the top of it before I hit this LA2A. But again, whoops, that's crazy.
And in your endless mercy,
you can see for this, this part of the song is where I'm really, the compressor I've chose to dig into is the LA2A, because, the LA2A is going to have like a little bit more of like a smooth and vibey thing. It's going to work really well for more of this kind of vibe.
'Cause I know you can
So if we look at like, these are my two main compressors.
Be still again and free my broken heart from what's within.
I don't know. I've just always liked limit mode on this one too. I don't find that it works that well on the Waves one, but I love this T-Rex one. But again, your mileage may vary. You got to find what works for you. That's just what works for me. So after we've compressed those, found a setting that works, I might have clip gained at one point a little bit. But yeah, maybe I was doing a little bit here. Maybe I boosted this a little bit to compensate for some of the previous compression, but anyway.
With fire and wind till ocean waves be still again and free my broken heart from what's.
Okay, de-esser.
With fire and wind till ocean waves be still again and be still again and free my broken heart from what's within.
I'm trying to, hit it so it only hits the S's.
Make mountains with a single breath.
Okay. Then we have the FG Moo. I think, there was something, I can't remember exactly what it was. I don't normally love this on all vocals because, like I said, it has like a little bit of a presence bump, but, I did dial the mix back.
Be still again.
I must have done this because, maybe I was listening in the car and I felt like the vocals were a little bit sunken. and I wanted it to poke out just a little bit. So I probably did this just for a little bit of that vibe.
And in your endless mercy,
And again, I'm probably using it more like an EQ than a compressor.
and in
And we have sibilance.
mercy, when I've lost my way.
Just because I wanted like a tiny bit extra compression. So that's what's going on there. Okay, let's play chorus and start bringing in the effects.
You can move with fire and wind.
Actually, let me just solo this vocal.
You can move with fire and wind till ocean waves be still again.
So de-essing before we go into the reverb, because there's nothing that bothers me more hearing the S's in the reverb.
You can move
And
with
so this is on a EMT 140 emulation, like 6 seconds, a little bit of modulation, full wet. Other than that, well, is this the stock setting? I don't know. Yeah, no, that is the stock setting. Cool.
You can move with fire and wind till ocean waves be still.
Looks like I'm leaving it pretty
again.
static, except for one little spot here I wanted like a throw.
I hear you call.
But yeah, then just did a little bit of shaping after
I
that,
hear you call.
just to make sure it didn't get too muddy.
I
It's
hear
bypassed.
you call.
You can hear it just a little muddy.
For me to trust with all my soul.
Just kind of puts it more in the space that's supposed to be in. Okay, now let's hear what this medium verb is
I
doing.
hear you call. I hear you call. You can move with fire and wind till ocean.
So it definitely sounds a little different. Sounds a little bit more like, you know, like a vintage digital hall. Imagine that. And then just like blended together.
You can move with fire and wind till ocean waves be still again. And free.
Just together, you know, it worked nicely. It was kind of a Bob Ross happy accident, I guess. Beyond that, quarter note delay. It's pretty standard.
I know you can move with fire and wind till ocean waves be still again. And free.
And it looks like I have this side chained to the vocal, so it's kind of ducking. So when he's actively singing, it's not as in the way.
I know you can move with fire and wind till ocean waves.
And it's just supposed to be kind of like, you know, in between the phrases, it's supposed to poke out just a little more without me necessarily needing to go and automate it as intensely.
Make mountains with the.
You can see I did a little bit more. Well, let me put the track back in real quick.
Holy Spirit, hand of God.
You know, just for this first one, I wanted it to really like open up that space and really just like be like, yeah, this is a power ballad. So I'm like, you know, the delays are nice and prominent. And then they kind of took a backseat until verse 2. And then I kind of automated it in between phrase just to poke out a little bit more.
Must I hear you call? For me to trust with all my soul. To leave behind where I've been.
Yeah, so you get the idea. Just kind of automating this in the parts that needed, little throws. Kind of key moments.
It lives in me instead. And in your
You know, and then figuring out, okay, is it going to be a spot in the song where it needs to be a quarter throw? Is it a spot in the song where it needs an eighth throw? Is it a spot in the song where it needs like the slap to really poke through? But yeah, let's, I guess let's move on. Let's listen to the eighth note. So again, de-essing before going into it. Echo Boy, eighth note. This might be pretty similar settings. Is it the same? Did I just copy it and change the subdivision? Nope. One's space echo, one is on studio tape. Let's solo the vocals again. So yeah, you can see here, you know, I wanted it to kind of take a backseat because, you know, the eighth note is inherently going to give it more of like a hurried feel compared to the quarter note. And it wasn't until, you know, chorus 2 that I really bring it in.
'Cause I
And the
know
sidechain
you
as well.
can move with fire and wind till ocean waves be still.
A couple of key moments.
Me instead, and in your hand, home again.
Yep. So you can hear that. And then once you put them together,
Me instead, and in your
I probably couldn't have been more intentional about deciding which one I wanted to do, but again, it was just kind of like, yeah, let's find the right vibe. And then more of the slap verb.
spur, the gods be home again.
This gives a little more attitude. So first part of the song, it's probably not going to be super prominent.
Fire and wind till ocean waves.
Just enough to give it kind of like a little bit of air around the vocal is kind of how I think about it in this section.
Fire and wind till ocean waves be still again.
It's almost like a room
And
reverb.
free my broken heart from what's within.
You know, and then a couple of key moments where I really wanted the slap to add to some of the attitude.
To leave behind where I've been.
And then chorus 2, once we're kind of trying to crank it up a little bit.
'Cause I know you can move with fire and wind till ocean waves.
Let me play that in the context of the track so you can hear that. Just popping in.
'Cause I know you can move with fire and wind till ocean waves.
You know, slap is really good to me for like adding kind of some intensity, and so I think that's why I did that. You can see I kind of did the same thing going into bridge 2.
It lives in me instead, and in your endless mercy. When I've lost my way, I hear you.
Yeah, for this part of the song, you know, I'm really wanting to, you know, to bring the agony up, and so it's like, okay, cool here. I just, you know, had it be relatively loud. I did pull it down a little bit for these other delay throws to not like necessarily have competition.
Home again.
And then back up for the final chorus, just for the added vibe.
Watch me.
And then I bumped it up for this whoa-oh because I didn't want the whoa-oh. I wanted the whoa-oh to feel more like an ad-lib than necessarily like a part of the lead vocal. So. And then pulling the slap down for the breakdown because
In the dark.
it's not supposed to necessarily have that. The doubler is really just, it's being sent from the lead vocal on the big chorus.
No, you can fire and wind till ocean waves be still again, and free my broken heart from what's within.
You can hear I'm sending a couple different tracks to that. Sorry about blowing out your ears there. But yeah, let's break down with the rest of the tracks. Sorry, now that you've kind of got an idea of the sauce. The big chorus vocal, it's pretty similar. Looks like I am getting that one. So yeah, joke's on me, I guess. Compared to the verse vocal, I'll call it, compared to this big chorus vocal, the big chorus, you know, I am doing a little bit more of like a top lift, just so it's like a little more open. And see, now I'm really going to start slamming it with this Blue Stripe 1176. So.
Home again.
Yeah, no fear.
I know you can move with fire and wind till ocean waves be still again, and free my broken heart from
Yes.
what's within. Oh, make mountains with a single breath and break them.
Kind of same trick here, just wanting a little more poking through. Again, using this more as a EQ than anything. And yes.
Home again.
And you can see how this is hitting
I know you can move with fire and
on
wind
the bus.
till ocean waves be still again.
And I guess on the whole bus here, you know, I did... This must have been like a later in the thing when I just felt like I was trying to get the overall like curve of things. You know, remember I had like all these shelves and whatnot. I think this was probably the other end of that where I was trying to get the right thing. My room was really in flux when I did this, so I think that's probably why. But Yeah, so that is the overall sauce on the lead vocals. Yeah, you can see I have it sent out bus 1 that I'm using for my sidechain keying, and then sending the big vocal to the doubler. Okay, the female vocal. Sending it to all the same effects. Honestly, pretty standard. I'll spend less time on this just because this video is already going pretty long. Tape, a little bit of getting rid of some of the mud. Usually on background vocals, I'm pretty aggressive with that compared to like a lead vocal. Just a little bit compressing. So that's that. And it sounds like it, yeah, I must have vocal lined it to the lead vocal just so it's like super tight.
I hear your tender whisper, the gods.
And then Cameron's vocal here. It looks like I pretty much copied some of the same settings. I probably more liberally slammed it, but... And then I just threw the doubler directly on there. Just because I wanted it to feel a little bit spacier rather than, you know, anything.
Make mountains with.
All right. Now, some verb throws.
'Cause I know
Let's put all this sauce back in.
loud.
There's a couple of keywords at the ends of like each section where I really wanted the verb to be taken. So what I did is I just probably copied like part of it, put it on this track, faded it in. You can see, you know, almost 8 seconds. The palace mode, which is super cool.
The darkness is so loud.
I just wanted it to kind of hang. You know, if I get rid of this,
The darkness is so loud.
it's a little more boring.
The darkness is so loud. 'Cause I know you can
You know, same thing with this throw here.
loud.
Oh no, that was the same thing. It just snapped back. Whoops.
Me to abide.
I feel like, yeah, it just kind of helps make some of those transitions feel a little bit more like cinematic and ethereal and everything. And then reuse this track going into the final chorus because, you know, he screams out home again.
Home again. I know you.
First, if I get rid of this,
Home again. I know you can.
you know, it's just not quite as epic. And I feel like this kind of adds some epic. So you can hear kind of the soup around the vocal as it's, you know, it's almost like, you know, he's singing the end of the phrase home again. And it's just like, he's almost like pulling back into this like cloud or reverb. And then like all of a sudden he's back in, you know, with the main lead vocal here. You can see, you know, bumping some of these, his BGV for the final. Okay, now this is where I started to add stuff and chop things up. So here's one of his lead vocals that I copied and pitched it down. See, it's his regular vocal, just pitched. Because otherwise, you know, it's just kind of, it's all in like that tenor range, but this kind of adds like a little bit of like extra like oomph. Super basic, just de-essing, compressing, pitch shift. And same thing with this octave up vocal. It's the exact same thing, just pitched and forming it up. And I think I was experimenting with vocal synth or Waves Harmony Engine or something. I just felt like it wasn't working, so we just ended up with all these. And we sent one of these to the doubler.
and still you got me.
But yeah, that's otherwise pretty much it. Hopefully that all makes sense. I know we had a lot to cover, and we've probably almost, I don't even know how long we've gone at this point. But yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. Happy to try to answer it. I don't think this is necessarily the end all be all of mixing the song, but this is just what I did. And hopefully that inspires you or gives you some ideas or gives you a little insight, or let me know if you have any questions and I'll try to answer it in the comments.